Uses of licensed or already popular music can improve a film in many ways, such as giving us a closer connection to the characters, showing that they listen to the same kind of music as we do, as ambience playing in the background of environments where you normally hear this type of music, such as a house or a restaurant, or just as a way to connect characters and events, sort of in the same way that a theme or a leitmotif might do in a traditional film score. But then sometimes we hear a familiar song get used in a film, and then we hear it used again, and again, and again. Often this is intentional for multiple different reasons. This is just an odd phenomenon I've noticed in films and haven't really heard a lot of people talk about. And keep in mind, I'm not ranking these based on which I think is the best film or which is even my personal favorite, but rather by which are most noticeable, most memorable, or which are most important to the film's plot. One of the most common types of movies to use this approach are musical biopics, or films about the music industry. Films such as La Bamba, Bohemian Rhapsody, Walk the Line, A Complete Unknown, and many more cover this subject. In the case of this list, I'm going for fictional rather than biographical, with That Thing You Do. This movie centers around an up-and-coming band called The Wonders, and their most popular, and as it turns out, only hit song of the same name, which the band performs at pretty much every concert in the film, which ends up being about 11 separate times total. And it makes sense that a movie chronicling these artists would repeatedly use their most famous work, therefore showing what it's like for these artists who have to perform these songs over and over throughout the years, especially one-hit wonder bands. The song itself is appropriately catchy, and written specifically for the film, reminiscent of 1960s pop. But every time you hear the band play it, you feel their frustration at having to repeat the only thing that they're known for, and the audience not opening up to their new material. And this film does just that, while still remaining funny and upbeat. At number 4 is the 1980s independent film Stranger Than Paradise, a slight and absurd comedy about three characters and the increasingly odd mundane situations that they find themselves in. One of these characters, Ava, carries around a portable cassette deck, only ever playing her favorite song, I Put a Spell on You by Screaming Jay Hawkins, which bookends the film during the opening and closing credits, and at different pivotal moments in between. Not only is the song played multiple times during the film, but is practically the only soundtrack of any kind in the otherwise quiet soundscape. I think it's a good way to give one of the main characters a quirk, while also fitting the repetitive and slightly off nature of this film perfectly. Not much to say, but an interesting use nonetheless. It's one thing to have a song play repeatedly through a film, but what about multiple different versions of that same song? That's exactly what Whisper of the Heart does. A lesser talked about Studio Ghibli film, which has a weird obsession with the song Take Me Home Country Roads by John Denver. First, a cover of the song by Olivia Newton-John is played over the opening credits. Then the main character, Shizuku, talks with another character about the song, as well as a parody she wrote of it called Concrete Roads. At a later point, her and the male protagonist perform another rewritten version as a violin duet. Then the song shows up in orchestral form periodically throughout the film's score. And then finally, another version of the song by Shizuku's voice actress Yoko Hana plays during the closing credits. The song, specifically the version by Olivia Newton-John, was a big hit in Japan. So it makes sense that a character of this age would grow a connection with the song and relate it to her life in Japan. It's an interesting inclusion, maybe a bit overkill, but it works just fine, and the film has certainly garnered a strong fan base in recent years. The 80s were a golden age for film soundtracks, with movies like Footloose, Rocky IV, and John Hughes films like The Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink. One of the most obvious examples is of course Top Gun, which is a great collection of 80s rock and pop songs which fits the energetic tone of the film. One of which, Take My Breath Away by the band Berlin, essentially acts as the love theme of the film, and it certainly lets you know. This song, without fail, keeps popping up over and over in any scene involving the romance at the heart of the film, which is mostly in the second act, and in scenes that aren't even spaced that far apart from each other. It's this tendency to keep restarting the song from the beginning, pretty much back to back, that makes it such an odd choice, and makes this section of the film feel pretty strangely edited. But either way, it's an iconic soundtrack from an iconic movie, and if you weren't familiar with the song before watching the movie, then you definitely are after. Number 1. It's Chungking Express. If you're familiar with filmmaking, or specifically Asian cinema, then you probably already know this one. The song California Dreaming by the Mamas and the Papas is played about 8 different times for a total of 9.5 minutes of the 98-minute long film. Like Stranger in Paradise, it's some of the only soundtrack in the background of the film. Like Whisper of the Heart, it's a typically American song reworked into an Asian context. And like Top Gun, it's themed around and used to associate the main character as well as the audience to Fei Wong's character. This is probably the most noticeable and most talked about entry on this list. It's hard to think about this film without the song immediately playing in your head, the way it does for the main character. And the romance at the center of the film would feel a little more empty without it. But not only is this song used over and over throughout the film, but so is another song, a cover of the Cranberries song Dreams by the same actress, which is used more than a couple times, including during the closing credits. So the soundtrack in the latter half of the film feels like a back and forth between these two songs. Other than just a clever use of soundtrack budget, this is one of the more interesting uses of already existing music in film that I've ever seen. As are all the other picks I chose for this list, as I'm sure that there's many other films that use this approach as well. So feel free to comment and tell me what other films use music this way. Or what's your favorite use of a song in a movie? Or just what other films have interesting editing quirks such as this.